All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to I think the fourth or fifth edition of the CI Chit Chat. Mind y'all, this is an ongoing thing, at least through the end of the year, probably through mid part of January, just to kind of get everybody up to speed as the moving environment within the carbon intensity world is ever changing. Mitch and I seem to be fairly close to it most of the time, almost all the time, and bringing you the latest and greatest. So, Mitch, thanks for joining again this morning. I know you're
Good to
out.
be here. Yep, up at the we're at the Big Soil Health event here this week up in Cedar Falls, Northeast Iowa. So spreading the word up there, and yeah, a lot of people are catching on. Saw our buddy Jerry Hatfield yesterday, Dr. Jerry Hatfield, and he goes, "Hey, it's Mister 45Z." So I don't know if that's hopefully that's good,
I've been
but
called worse, so I think I'd take that.
that's what I said. So, but good stuff going. Continuing to spread the word, and yeah, happy to jump into another chit chat here and continue to answer the questions.
Cool. Just as a reminder, keep popping questions into the chat either on this Zoom, otherwise through the link as well. We've got quite a few out there, so we'll just get things fired up right now as I continue to kind of get people admitted in here. As far as review questions, I always like to go over the last kind of like the latest and greatest five that always seem to come up, and so a lot of the questions revolve what is carbon intensity. So if you haven't been here before, it is simply the amount of energy that goes into every bushel of grain that gets produced. So think of every pass across the field, every unit of energy that we consume as we produce our grain, that is what carbon intensity is. And
Mm.
so we'll talk more about that. And some of the questions actually revolve around, actually, this week is different crops, Mitch. So people are
Yeah,
wanting
yeah.
like other crops in the marketplace. So the billion bushel challenge, if you've seen some of that out there, really what that is focused on is visibility. So we talk about three things: visibility, control, and then rewards. Really, the first step is providing visibility with carbon intensity scoring and knowing what is the value of the production that you have today or what you're doing. And so a lot of that revolves around the Department of Energy giving us a standardized score for what we do today of a 29.1. We know, Mitch, I think we were talking the other day, on average, every score that we have in our system today is roughly around an 8, 9,
Eight. Yeah,
8,
yeah.
an 8. And the Department of Energy gives us no credit, right? We get that 29.1 as a standard. So every bushel that we produce today gets that standard score.
Yep. Yep. So, and a lot of conversation here this week along the same lines. A lot of people asking, like, okay, hey, why is the ethanol plant going to actually like share in this, and like, who is regulating that, and why would they need to share? And the thing is, like, unless we know what our scores are and know what our scores are worth and know how to be able to have a meaningful conversation and negotiation, there isn't any real like, there's no like requirement for them to share. It's a tax credit for biofuel.
Yeah.
But if we can, I believe that they should share a decent amount of the cut, because that's going to get more farmers to the table who are lowering their CI scores. And if there's some rigor through it, like with certification and a third party verification program like we do, now we can avoid fraud as well. Get more people to the table, grow the pie, and have more money for all of our rural communities here. So, but starts with knowing what your score is.
Absolutely. Well said. And there's a few other questions that I go through normally, but I think I'm going to tie onto that because it is interesting, right? Because it is about farmers creating new markets or helping to create new markets. Just so happens the 45Z, Mr. 45Z, the biofuel credit, right? So I think what we talk about is the opportunity as farmers. How do we get paid, right? And 45Z is the path to the quickest payment. But there are other markets out there that are looking at low carbon grain. That's what we're talking about, right? Low carbon intensity grain. Again, the amount of energy that goes into that production, it gets attached to that production, and then it gets consumed down the line. So with biofuel, 45Z is that tax credit. So here's my question, right? It came in from Idaho. Jared, hey, if we're doing corn, soybeans, and a few other crops, what about my potatoes? So what does
Yeah.
that look like? Other markets?
Yeah. I think I'm super bullish on this because I think it is going to expand to these other markets and going to be like just kind of the norm and the standard for being able to decarbonize or drive the next wave of sustainability or whatever you want to call it. So for these other crops, though, with the score that we're using today for biofuel is from the GREET model. And we use that because it's named in the law, and it's developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. So a government program. And and that's the standard today for quantifying your grain carbon intensity as it goes into fuel. For potatoes, for even wheat or cotton, other crops, we don't necessarily have that same ability to score. We're exploring different tools and stuff, different calculators, but in the short term, we're saying, hey, maybe we just utilize the GREET model as a proxy to still showing you kind of what you could do to move the needle and improve the score. But just know that, hey, we don't have the ability to give you a super dialed in number like what we can with corn, soybeans, sorghum, rice. We can score those crops today, but some of these other crops, we can point you in a decent direction. And maybe there's other tools out there that can get a score, but in the short term, hey, let's use corn or some of these crops in the GREET model as a proxy and be able to just compare and start building up those databases. It's number one, Chad, I mean, back to your point, it's about visibility. It's about being able to control the narrative here on what is my data worth and how do I move the needle and make sure that the farmers continue to own that data and can utilize it to partner with their supply chain partners and create value around the data.
Right. And I think that's what I think of, right, as a producer ourselves, right? We look at how do we empower the producers to take control, right? And looking at these new markets, if we wait for a market to be created, then we're takers, right? And I think since we do control the markets as producers, we can start to actually take control of what it is that we want to do to create these markets. So
there's a lot
back without in Idaho, but I think it's a minute before we get all that kind of cleaned up.
It's going to be a little bit. There's some short-term kind of workaround deals that we can do, but yeah, some of these other crops and like other crops being added to the GREET model is going to be slow. They're adding canola right now, but I think it's going to be at least a full year process, and that'll just be to release version 1 of canola CI scores. So adding other crops to the GREET model, it's going to be slow, and that's where like today we can use it as a proxy, or hey, if there's other tools out there, we can run the scores based on that and integrate those tools into TopSoil, as long as we have some visibility on reverse engineering the tools to make agronomic recommendations. But with all this stuff, with those new markets and all that, I've been talking a lot about, I've been out on the speaking circuit here all the last 10 days. And a lot of conversations about billion bushel. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what's the concept? And I'm like, well, it's a two-way marketplace here that's got to be built out. And we've got the chicken and the egg. And I've been explaining where like the chicken, one side of the marketplace, and that's the IRS, and like these ethanol plants that they can't really do anything yet because we don't have the IRS rules. Like we can't build that offtake side of the marketplace, but we can start with the egg. We can start with the farm side of the marketplace. We can start with getting scores. We can start by building awareness. We can start by creating that visibility. And as the second side of the marketplace comes to fruition, we're sitting here ready to go. And we can start the conversation now. We're having tons of conversations all the time with key biofuel players. But so just like the potato guys or any other markets, hey, might not have the perfect tools, but if we can start talking about those markets and build them up organically, it moves things in the right direction.
Yeah, let's jump into what we know better than potatoes, right? We eat a lot of the potatoes, our corn, our biofuel with our diesel, so soy diesel and corn for our ethanol markets. So I'm going to kind of set you up for a question here that's pretty interesting because we talked about GREET. So came in from Nevada, Iowa, and so what they're trying to figure out is, well, we must have sat in a Zoom because he's saying if the average ethanol biofuel score is 55, which I think we've talked about that. How do we get below 55 to get in compliance? Well, let me talk a little bit about how that 29.1 makes up that 55.
Yeah.
So being in compliance, it's talking about the biofuel companies being in compliance. So maybe high level on that.
Being able to get below 50. So keep in mind, the average ethanol plant today has a CI score around 55, and that is the CI score per gallon of ethanol. They're not in the money with 45Z until they get below 50. So yeah, 5 today or anything above 50, we got to start moving the ball forward now so that we're below 50 come Jan 1, 2025 and be producing biofuel that is under 55 throughout all of 2025. So in order to do that, you can look at all three of your different scopes: scope 1 reductions, scope 2 reductions, and scope 3. Scope 1 is at the facility, and that's what like the pipelines would impact and reduce your CI score by like 25 to 30 points with those CO2 pipelines. On scope 2, that's your energy. You can use more renewable energy, maybe figure out solar or wind kind of things, maybe some other heat reclamation type stuff, some other efficiencies to reduce that scope 2 carbon footprint. Again, kind of slow and expensive, and hopefully a lot of companies have already been working on that one. Scope 3 is your supply chain, and the corn, which today that corn has a CI score on average of 29.1. So it's a big contributor to the overall score of 55. But as we've seen, our average farmer today has a score of 8, and been running a lot of numbers and stuff that, you know, companies just starting to ask their farmers what their data is and running the scores. I think a lot of cases are going to find that lower than 29. But they got to start asking for the data, and we got to create awareness to create that visibility and be able to build out these marketplaces. And a lot of biofuel companies just aren't talking about this yet, which I understand. We all have the rules, but we got to start talking about this if we're going to have that amount of awareness to get 6 billion bushels aware that they can bring a lower score than the default to the table. But
I'm going to interrupt you there because that ties into this next one. But if a farmer doesn't have a CI score that they're getting themselves, they do get that default 29.1. So talk about, I think you do a good job of explaining it, better than most, right?
And it's just, we always generalize it here, right, to 29.1, because that's just like the base, like standard number. I usually see 29.1 or 29.2 people talk about. We use 29.1. But in reality, the score is a default per county. It's not just 29.1. Like in Washington County, Iowa, it's 29.4. So you got to look at your individual county, and you're either the county number if you don't have the data, or you've got to be able to showcase that you're better than the county number and bring your real numbers to the table. And likely to really optimize the dollars, likely got to be verified, have a verified, third-party verified CI score. That's the whole point of CI certification, where it's like, okay, how do we build tools for ourselves as farmers that's going to help to really optimize this opportunity? And we got to document all these practices so it can get verified, so that as we sell those low CI bushels, we're able to have certainty and hopefully optimize those dollars that are going to our pockets as well.
And we're getting in the weeds today. Good questions. I know that was kind of left over from last week from the beta, but I think that one call out here that somebody sent a note here is Nebraska's average CI score, 24 ethanol plants, is 53. So out of the 24, it's a 53, not a 55. So I think they're trying to talk about saying Nebraska's better than Iowa. I don't know what that looks like. But
yeah.
So maybe an easier one here to talk about is like, this was kind of the review from last week. How do I get my CI score? There are different ways to be able to get that, but going to topsoil.ag, you can go in and actually create, within 10 minutes, you can create your farm profile for each crop. So for corn, for example, we just did one the other day online with a guy. It took 12 minutes. We've put all the generalities of what he's going to do for next year production, costing $500, and he was at a 16.2. So again, back to your point, Mitch, right? He's not at a 29.1. He has lower CI grain than that 29.1. Now opening that market and opportunity for a biofuel credit.
Like, it's a heck of a lot better than being 29. He's not going to get, it's not amazing by any means, but like, hey, going from 29 to 16, like that's just about half, just about halfway to zero. And now with our CI calculator tool, he can toggle practices and determine what are the best ways to adjust and get that CI score even lower if he wants to, but it's even a score of 16 is pretty good and like creates good value. But, just knowing, hey, here's the opportunity to lower, that's really where we got to start. So
Mitchell, check this out. So I was on another call. We were talking about what happens if I have catastrophic failure. I have a CI score of, let's take the 16.2. We were on a call with a gentleman, and he's like, what happens, I'm projecting out a 16.2 and the ethanol plant wants to take my lower CI grain and I have a catastrophic failure. We went into the calculator and we took his APH from 200 down to 150, which was, now we've got an insurance event. But even bad as what it would have been, it was a 29.5. And
Oh,
so
wow.
with energy was still at a 29.1, right? So he was like very impressed with the fact that, like, again, we're not getting credit for what we do as producers. So maybe talk a
But
little.
but his overall dollars, his overall bottom line is definitely going to be hurt in that case, right? I just had a meeting yesterday with an insurance company, a massive insurance company. I still can't name them publicly on this yet, but important for everyone to know that things like this are coming. Okay, so I was talking with this group yesterday, who's working on basically gap insurance for your per acre revenue protection insurance. Okay, so how it would work is you get federal crop insurance for whatever kind of coverage rate you want, but for the remainder of your potential revenue per acre, there would be this additional insurance product. And it would be the difference, like, so looking at not just your yield, but also the potential dollars coming in from 45Z, from CI, to have a insurance product to cover that whole thing. So say your typical, say your profit was going to, or say your total revenue was going to end up being $1,000, and your CI anticipated like financial opportunity was going to be $100. So now instead of just insuring $1,000 worth of revenue protection, now we're looking at that $1,100 mark, being able to actually have some guarantee for that farmer that they're not just protecting the yield and potential yield implications, but total revenue protections. Like, pretty slick deal. And looking at piloting that right after the first of the year and just running some numbers, crunching some stuff, I think that could be an awesome deal, especially for farmers that are looking at some major change of practices, that are worried about like things like adding a cover crop or reducing tillage. Hey, if there was additional insurance coverage, as long as it was cost effective, like, that could really help to lower that risk.
Absolutely. Hey, it's interesting. That's things I didn't even know, right? Thanks, Mitch. Hey, I think one of the cool things here, I'm going to talk a little bit. It's going to go back to like more of a basic, kind of digging into the weeds a little bit here, which I think is awesome because we are on, session 3, 4. These new markets, right? So biofuel tax credits. So what makes Continuum unique? I'm going to highlight a couple of things, right? Mitch and I are both 7th generation farmers. We're doing these things to be able to help out the American producer. I think it allows us to take control as producers of our data. One of the things that just recently happened that we didn't anticipate, Mitch, and I don't think we have to talk a lot about it, but think about it like your wallet in your pocket, right? You pull out that wallet, now you can use it when you want. If that data is stored somewhere, that's great, but accessibility to that data with TopSoil, it is a third-party independent that your data is secure. We just happen to have a partner in the industry that had called last week and said, hey, we need some help. Do you have any producers that would be interested in this type of a program? We had put folks queued up. We were able to call customers and say, hey, here's a great program. It was worth quite a bit of money for every acre they had. And literally, if they wanted to, they could pull their wallet out and say, hey, let's use our data to take advantage of these things. So maybe talk a little bit about maybe not that program specifically, but like being able to be ready as a producer to be queued up and ready to go.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of different sustainability programs that are going to continue to come to the table. Obviously, we're talking about low carbon fuel driven by 45Z tax credits. That's circling around CI. Okay. Carbon intensity, one environmental outcome, but different CPG companies and different supply chains, they're looking at all kinds of different sustainability credits and outcomes around carbon or water or other things. So yeah, this past week, an opportunity came about where there was a look back credit for things that we had already done over this 2023 growing season. And on my farm, we were able to tap into it and get some of our other farmers in that we already had a lot of their data put together in TopSoil. We already got boundaries. We already got management information. Like, it's that stuff that we need to run carbon intensity scores, but also it's the same data that can be utilized to generate these other outcomes. So point being there is, hey, carbon intensity is obviously what we're really, really bullish on, like really banking on. But there's tons of other programs that are also out there, different opportunities potentially to stack with CI. Or if you're not able to play into a low carbon biofuel market, like our buddies out there in Idaho with the potatoes, hey, might not be able to directly tap into a tax credit opportunity in the short term, but maybe there can be some other sustainability programs. But it all takes the same data. You got to have boundaries because I need to know what fields are being entered and they can't be double dipped. And then it's just the management data. And there's some pretty serious cash that guys can get paid. That program, we were looking at like $20 an acre for stuff that the farmers had done here this past year. It's a carbon program, but getting paid for having that data put together. So really good exercise, I think, for all of us at Continuum, where it's like, wow, we have never actually really at scale pushed a carbon program. We've been involved in lots of them. We've helped farmers on one-off scenarios get involved in different carbon programs, but to be able to do it at a pretty large scale in a very short amount of time was an interesting exercise. And yeah,
So my point there too, Mitch, it's awesome, right? So like,
yeah,
whether or not you believe in carbon programs, whether or not you've participated in them in the past, I think my point here too is like having that data at the ready, right? So carbon intensity, CI scoring, it basically gathers 90% of what you're going to need for those type of programs if you choose to do them. What we're speaking about again today is like carbon intensity 101. It's the amount of energy that is consumed to produce that unit of or that bushel of corn. It doesn't matter if it's a carbon program that is not associated with us. You can still take that data, export that, and actually be a part of a program. So I think, again, going back to visibility, just knowing and understanding. So again, the first step in carbon intensity, or at least within our billion bushel challenge, right? Us as farmers, we should understand what is the value based on a biofuel credit today of capturing your data and attaching to the bushels. So that is the premise of this. But all these little rabbit holes we go down, I think, is to show at least this audience that there are opportunities everywhere. Yep. We have to at least, number one, know the value in what we're doing today.
Right. I think probably important to be able to publicly say that this program last week, we were partnering up with ARVA to do it. We have lots of different relationships out there. ARVA, in some instances, we kind of compete because they're in the carbon intensity space. So are we, but we're buddies with these guys. They had a good opportunity with a large CPG brand, and they were looking for additional acres. And we were able to say, hey, we've got a bunch of our farmers that we know are doing some good stuff. We've already got a lot of their data, and let's call some of them up and see if they could participate. It was very targeted, so we couldn't share it out to the masses. It was very, very targeted, but those farmers that were in position and some folks able to tap into some pretty nice Christmas money here. So, but yeah, Chad, it's those opportunities, like they're going to just continue to come about. Like this is some exciting stuff. And the key, I think for me, the key is I want to make sure that I am in control of my data, that I own my data, and I get to choose where I'm participating as far as a farmer. And same thing for everyone else that's on here. Like that data is really valuable. Make sure that you've got it organized, you've got it put together, and you own it, and you're ready to use it when the right opportunity comes to fruition.
All right, Mitchell, I set you up for this one, right? That was kind of a long-winded question to set you up for this next one here. So path to payment, it seems pretty simple, right? But actually, this is coming from Ryan out in Southwest Kansas, Liberal Kansas. I think that's Southwest, yeah, ish. So Ryan's asking, what is the path to payment on biofuel? Yeah. So like what we just talked about was, hey, what if you summarize everything we just talked about, it's all about collaboration, right? And so I'm gonna set you up here, right? Because when you talk about collaboration and you look at the biofuel companies that need access to low carbon intensity grain, maybe talk a little bit about the path to payment using 45Z.
Yeah. So those biofuel companies will hire a MMRV partner at their facility, where there's a bunch of them: Bushel, ARVA, Verity, Indigo, FBN, lots of companies that could be that MRV player at the ethanol plant. They need to collect those CI scores for all the bushels that go across that plant scales. We are not one of those companies. We looked at being one, but we actively chose to not necessarily be an MRV player at the ethanol plant. Instead, we are going and helping all the farmers independently get verified CI scores that could then be plugged in to those programs. So the path to payment as a farmer is that we need to get field by field verified CI scores, which takes a lot of data tracking. We might as well start now to track it throughout the year, to do it in bite-sized chunks. Because if it's a year from now and 45Z is ready to roll, and you're like, hey, I need to gather all this data from the whole last 15 months and get it verified, I don't know that we're going to be able to. I can't promise that we can do it for $5 an acre like we're doing today. Okay, is basically what it boils down to. I hope that we can still keep it as cheap as we can as possible. But today we do $5 to get verified CI scores field by field. And then when you want to use it at that local ethanol plant, whatever company is their MRV player, say it's Bushel, we're working with those guys to say, hey, farmer farmer Ryan here has verified CI scores. He's selling these 5 loads of corn to you. We help to transact that data and make sure that's secure and you don't have to double enter data. We already got it verified. And now that ethanol company has more farmers been brought to the table because that's what they need. They need more participation. They want those low CI scores. And also, that's already verified. It helps to avoid fraud. There's those three main problems that we are helping to solve for the biofuel companies: more farmer participation, lower CI scores, avoid fraud. That this is verified, it's legit, instead of just basic farmer entered data. This is through that verification process that we help you to go through and get it third party verified, so it's real. And that's going to drive then the best opportunity for that individual farmer to get their fair share of the dollars, because it's legit. They've gone through the work, and now they're in position to get paid.
Love it. So now let me talk about that, right? So we just talked in less than, I don't know, 20, 15, 20 minutes there about, first off, visibility, right? That is the CI score. We talked about taking control, which is the certification process at $5. And then ultimately what Ryan wanted to know is, how do I get paid? That's the reward, right? So if you look at the process behind it, it seems very simple, right? But you have to get started to know at least the visibility behind what you're doing today. That is what the Billion Bushel Challenge is about. That is what we and Mitch and I are about. Is we're trying to educate the American farmer to know. We talk about the value with this beneath your feet, right? Mitch talks about that a lot with soil health. A lot of the farming practices that we're using today, it literally all contributes to a lower CI score. So it's not like a traditional game that you would play. The higher score, the more you win. You want to fully optimize by being net carbon neutral, right? Which is zero. Mitch, I think you talked a couple different times of your grain being negative grain, super attractive, right? Hit it home here. We got the last 3 minutes. What keeps you up at night? This is my question to you. What keeps you up at night when you talk about how do we educate? So what, my last question there is like, how do we educate producers to be able to understand visibility? Nothing else, just visibility. What keeps you up? How do we do that?
Yeah, it really ends up just being us squandering this opportunity. That's my concern. And our buddy, old Tommy V, Secretary of Ag, Tom Vilsack, said, and we use his quote of like, hey, this is an amazing opportunity. We need to be like capturing this. And if you don't, like, you're probably not going to like the alternative, was essentially what he had said. And so to me, it ends up being, we've got a 3-year tax credit program. We don't have the stinking rules yet. So it's like, I understand why there's not as many people talking about it like we are, but gosh dang, like we know enough of this and we know the direction of where things are going. And we just proved here over the last week, like, hey, even without a CI thing, there's other sustainability programs that more than create ROI for doing this stuff, and more than like can pay the bills and make guys some pretty serious money. But no matter what, it's going to continue to go in this space. What keeps me up is these companies today, those average plants in Nebraska have a CI score of 53. They got to get going now to get below 50. And in order for them to really maximize this opportunity, they need to have as low of a score as possible, which takes as much participation as we can, which takes getting as low a CI scores as we can in a very short amount of time, which takes understanding and controlling that data and controlling the practices that we're implementing. And if we want this to be legit, it's got to be avoiding fraud, and because it's got to pass through IRS. I mean, this is a federal tax code kind of thing. We've got to have legit data, which means we got to be documenting and making sure that this passes the level of rigor. I believe if we can do that, there's a good chance that these tax credits could be extended, and or these markets are going to expand into other verticals as well beyond biofuel. But step number one is we got to have that awareness to hit the ground running. I mean, we've got basically 12 months, 12 and a half months until day one. And the best way to make sure that these companies are optimizing that opportunity is to have a CI score below 50 on day one, meaning January 1, 2025. be below 50. That way you're in the money essentially right off the gate. But we got to start really ramping things up. And I understand we don't have the rules. I don't know when we're going to get the rules. The word on the street right now is maybe rules in March, but I'm still not holding my breath on that. Like, we got to make sure that we are documenting, understanding scores in position to maximize these opportunities.
So let me last minute here. I'm gonna steal the last second from you. So really, what I'm gonna summarize what you said there is being proactive versus reactive, right? Taking our opportunity. So like Tommy V said, right? Taking our opportunity to be proactive, knowing what we know today. As soon as it does get the final sign off with the GREET model in March, let's say, our ability to digest that algorithm and spit out that number is when I say that number, that CI score, it's there. It's instantaneous, right? We can digest that and make that adjustment. But you talked about carrot and stick, right? So being proactive tells us that we can create these markets versus as a producer being told we have to do these things. And so that being said, as I talk to producers out in the marketplace, taking initiative, being proactive puts us in control, right? So I'll leave it at that. But if you did not get a chance to see all of this, I've seen a few, we were admitted a few late. You'll see this on our social media platforms too. Check us out online, Continuum.ag, billionbushel.com, Billion Bushel Challenge. Get a chance to check us out. Thanks a lot, Mitch. Appreciate your time. As always, it's been fun.
See you, everyone. Have a good day.